Gotterhavn, Unholy Consortium. Written by June Chevalier. The city of Farrendal Heights might be one of the prettiest in all Trestern. Perhaps even in all Gotterhavn. Its spires and steep roofs of greyish blue tile fell like a cascade down a hillside, and here and there the flow broke on oak trees, which, in this season, like flame glowed in orange. A few hundred feet below its outer walls lay the ancient river Haesa, clear and cool at the trough of the valley. The hunting party moved past a path that branched off the main road on the other side of the vale. It led to a tree barrow, which Isolde had ordained to build, so they may bury their erstwhile bodies of the revenants, since those who came back from death did so in new bodies, similar in appearance, different in flesh. There were Haesans among the party. They looked in astonishment at the colossal tree that sprouted from the crest of the barrow.
"Is that where you bury your vessels?" asked one of the foreigners.
"Aye," replied Vigris. "Mine was buried there."
"You've died before?"
"Once." He stopped to take a better look at the tree that twisted and contorted towards the sky. "You Haesans drown your bodies in the sea, I heard."
"You heard correct. To feed the fish, giving back to Gotterhavn what we have taken from her, as Iris had once said long ago."
Vigris turned and stood facing north on a road through which countless had trodden. He had always liked the view of the capital city of Trestern from this vantage point, where the city seemed to be framed by the great mountain that jutted like black and white crown against the autumn sky. Streams rushed down from its heights, breaking upon rocks and pouring itself into the Haesa, powering many sawmills that scattered throughout. Some of those sawmills had stood for ages, as witnesses to the reign of Orivane, perhaps even before the great destruction, when he had been a mere local ruler here. He often wondered how it might have looked back then. Vigris had very little idea. He had only lived under Isolde's divine reign, when the old tales of Gotterhavn, under one patron god, were spoken, but not felt. He often envisioned, with images conjured up from reading the history of this very land, the blood and sweat that had seeped into the tightest crevices of Farrendal Heights. Even beautiful places hid the most gruesome mysteries, brutal persecutions, and the vilest betrayals. All places were the same. He had learned throughout his journeys to various towns and villages as an equerry that blood was the building block of societies. History mattered, but witnessing all the beauty that had begotten of all those tragedies gave him a sense of satisfaction. At least it did not turn sour. At least Trestern was not Dayroth. The party that Vigris was leading moved slow. They were now walking down the made road that split Trestern in half, connecting Dayroth in the south and Votten in the north. The wagons carried the game they had hunted for days. They felt lucky Zilgan's influence had not yet reached Trestern. They'd heard of how in Zilgan's Dayroth dead bodies rot, their muscles withering the longer time passes. Such was what these Aresans had told around the campfire, those who had joined the hunting party on their way to cross the country. They had gasped when they first saw Farrendal Heights, poking its way between the mountains like the jewel of the valley. It must have been the most wondrous sight, given what they had just witnessed weeks prior in Dayroth, a land ravaged by vile creatures. Nowhere in Gotterhavn could one hope to find a more picturesque landscape than the one the hunting party was now witnessing. Its beauty penetrated even the obscuring veil of this cloudy day. To their left, the Gotterhavn mountain range stretched northward. To their right, the land sloping down and then leveling onward, disappearing out of sight into the grey haze, where he imagined the Haesa met the great river Galeras and on toward the calm sea. As they moved carefully down the slope, the land opened up before them. To their sides there lay neatly built vineyards with stone fences, tall enough to ward off pests, low enough to let the travellers admire the barns and whitewashed houses, the beautiful damsels and hard-working farmers. In this altitude, the elves built sweet berries plantations wherever the small patches of spruce and pines came to an end. A small acre of land was bestowed to whosoever came and asked the goddess Isolde, and even though she let them choose what to do with the lands, most people preferred the simple, peaceful lives of Trestern farmers, artisans, and gatherers. What had seemed small from afar, the hill on which Farrendal Heights rested, now stood like a giant beyond the river Haesa. At a cloudy afternoon such as now, it was calm. The birds were flying home, the trees silent. But one sound felt rather unfamiliar. It was an eerie peal, or so Vigris thought. Indeed, when the party reached the trough of the valley and crossed the river, Vigris heard the faint toll of bells echoing on the mountain slopes around them. It was when he walked within 2 miles from the gate when he could actually make out the tolls much clearer. Once, twice, and then thrice. A tritone. Over and over and over it repeated. "Someone died," said Tavian, looking around. He'd been very eager to show the strangers Trestern culture. This time, however, none of them was impressed. A ripple of disturbance swept across the hunting party. Death never came naturally in a land of immortal beings. The travellers could not have known that the death of a person was a rare phenomenon in Trestern, where wars had somehow failed to touch. But these hunters, in truth, wielded an incredible aversion to death. The cycle of death and resurrection was a rather outlandish idea. Stories of faraway lands where they had never been. Some of the younger ones had never even witnessed death their whole lives. They turned and looked at each other in askance. What happens when an immortal creature dies? Vigris was wiser than most. He had seen many deaths in his lifetime, as a part of the equerry rank. He had guided tired souls to find the victor's crypt, and had killed many in the process, and had once been killed. He had seen the underrealm during his death, and had journeyed to find the resurrection lake, and returned to Gotterhavn once more. Not many people knew. Some of the hunters that had been walking by his side might not have the slightest clue of the fact that Vigris had died once, and they certainly did not know how he had gone as deep as the Grand Chasm to kill and steal the rotten heart of Wellspen, the plague worm that dwelled in that realm where the High Fount, the god of gods, hid his botched creations. As fervent as these hunters wanted to hear more of the tragedy, they couldn't move any quicker. So, ever so slowly, they rolled the carriages on the road, snaking around the rocky cliff on their left, the cliff atop which the walls of Farrendal Heights nestled. To their right, the valley dropped in a gradual slant, where the river flowed like a white snake in a sea of green. The old gate loomed as tall as the cliff at the end of the road. There were guards on the parapet, somewhere around 80 feet above them, where the green banner of Trestern swayed to the wind. There was a muffled din when the hunting party entered the old gate and made their way up the main road that slowly picked up altitude along the face of the cliff. People could be seen peeking from the windows of the houses atop the cliff, overlooking the valley below. Some hurried to market squares where they could hear information. Some to the taverns to speak of it. Some spoke of it on the streets. Most of the residents here were elves. These fellows were as if curious cats, deep within their poise and collected facade. But one beautiful elf, a face Vigris had longed to see, emerged from the crowd to greet him on his way. "We bring the grouse, milady, as you've ordered," said Vigris jokingly at the approaching girl. "Have you heard?" asked Neria, her eyes wide open. "Have you, Vigia?" "The bells? Aye," replied Vigris, studying the face that embodied the playfulness of youth. Her full, pink lips, however, curled no smile, and she was even paler than usual. "No, not the... Yes, the toll. But I meant to say the person. Oh, how could you have known? You've only just arrived." She studied the hunting party that kept moving past Vigris. "What's the matter, Neria?" "Your daughter," she said. "A man broke into your house." Vigris gulped, and it felt as though he swallowed a clump of thorns. "Where is she now? Where's Elaine?" "She's..." Neria faltered. She took a moment to muster enough courage to continue. "She was murdered."